The golden light of evening spilled gently across a quiet town, where everything seemed calm, ordinary. But sometimes the most unforgettable stories begin when life feels the most peaceful. On this day, one man's routine shift turned into something that would touch hearts forever. A sound shattered the stillness, not just any sound, but the desperate cry of a child. A little girl, her tiny hands trembling, her eyes filled with tears and hope. She ran toward an officer, pleading for help. What happened next would change everything. The evening sun dipped low, casting warm golden shadows across the quiet streets of a small town. Officer James guided his patrol car slowly down the familiar roads, his mind wandering toward the thought of a simple dinner and a peaceful night at home. The hum of the engine blended with the faint sounds of children's laughter in the distance, the barking of dogs, and the occasional rustle of leaves in the cool breeze. Everything felt safe, ordinary, and calm, the kind of evening that reminded him why he loved serving this community. Yet life has a way of surprising us in the most unexpected moments. Sometimes, it is in the silence of an ordinary day that the most extraordinary stories begin to unfold. Before we dive deeper into this unforgettable video, make sure to like the video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell icon. That way, you'll never miss any new coming videos like this. Now, let's get back to it. As James turned onto Maple Avenue, a sound pierced the stillness of the night, sharp, desperate, and impossible to ignore. It was the cry of a child. His hands tightened on the steering wheel as his instincts took over. He slowed the car, scanning the sidewalks, searching for the source. Then he saw her. A little girl, no more than 6 years old, came running toward his patrol car. Her pink dress was wrinkled, her hair messy and tangled as though she had been running for a long time. Her cheeks glistened with tears, but her eyes held a fragile spark of hope. The little girl stumbled as she reached the car, her tiny chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. She pressed her small hands against the window, her voice shaking as she cried, "Please, please follow me home." Her words were broken by sobs, but the urgency in her tone was impossible to miss. Officer James immediately stepped out, kneeling down to her level so she wouldn't feel so small and alone. "Hey there," he said gently, keeping his voice calm and warm. "You're safe now. I'm here to help." The girl clung to his hand, her grip surprisingly strong for someone so fragile. Her eyes darted anxiously toward the street behind her, as though afraid that every passing second mattered. Without hesitation, James nodded. "All right, sweetheart, let's go together. Show me where you live." And just like that, the little girl tugged at his hand, guiding him forward with determined steps. They moved quickly down the quiet block, the evening light fading into longer, darker shadows. James couldn't help but notice the atmosphere shifting with every corner they turned. Houses looked worn down, lawns unkempt, and a heavy silence lingered in the air, a silence that carried the weight of something unspoken. The girl glanced back at him repeatedly, her tear-stained face filled with fear but also trust. Each step she took seemed to carry the burden of a secret too big for someone so young to hold. James tightened his stride, his senses sharpening, already preparing for what might lie ahead. The girl's small footsteps echoed against the cracked pavement as she pulled James toward a narrow alley. The fading sunlight struggled to reach into the shadows, and the air seemed to grow heavier with every step. James's instincts sharpened, his training reminding him that this was no ordinary situation. He stayed alert, scanning the surroundings, but his focus remained on the trembling hand that held tightly onto his. As they turned the corner, the girl finally spoke again, her voice barely more than a whisper. "My mommy, she won't wake up." The words cut through the silence like a blade, sending a chill down James's spine. He didn't press her with more questions. He could hear the terror and desperation in her tone, and he knew time mattered. They stopped at the end of the alley where a small, weathered house stood. The yard was overgrown, weeds pushing up through the broken walkway. The front door creaked, slightly ajar, swaying gently with the breeze as if inviting them in. The little girl froze, her shoulders trembling. She looked up at James with wide, frightened eyes, silently pleading for courage. James bent down and gave her a reassuring nod. "It's okay. I'm right here with you." Together, they stepped toward the door. The hinges groaned as James pushed it open, revealing a dimly lit room inside. The air was thick, heavy with the smell of neglect. Toys were scattered across the floor, bills piled on tables, and a silence hung in the air that told a story before a single word was spoken. The dim light from a single window barely reached across the living room, revealing a space that felt abandoned by hope. Empty food containers sat on the coffee table, unopened mail and bills were stacked carelessly, and toys lay scattered as if left behind in a rush. Officer James's eyes scanned the room quickly, every detail speaking volumes about the struggles inside these walls. He crouched slightly, keeping his voice calm as he asked, "Where is she, sweetheart?" The little girl pointed with a trembling hand toward a hallway. "In there," she whispered, her lips quivering. James squeezed her hand gently before leading the way. Each step down the hallway felt heavier, the silence pressing against him. At the very end, a door stood partially open. He pushed it wider, and the scene inside stopped him cold. On the bed lay a young woman, barely in her 20s. Her skin was pale, her breathing shallow and uneven, her face flushed with fever. Sweat clung to her forehead, strands of hair plastered to her skin. She didn't stir at the sound of the door, nor at James's footsteps approaching the bed. "Mommy," the little girl's voice cracked as she rushed to her side, clutching her mother's limp hand. Tears streamed freely down her cheeks. James quickly knelt beside the woman, checking her pulse with practiced care. Relief washed over him. She was alive, but barely. He reached for his radio, his voice steady but urgent. "Dispatch, I need an ambulance immediately. Possible severe illness. Patient unresponsive but breathing." James kept his hand firmly on the young woman's wrist, silently counting her faint pulse. She was hanging on, but every second felt fragile, like holding glass that could shatter at any moment. Beside him, the little girl Emily clung desperately to his arm. Her small body trembled as sobs escaped between her words. "Is my mommy going to be okay?" she asked, her wide eyes glistening with fear. James met her gaze, searching for the right words. "We're going to do everything we can to help her," he promised softly. He knew the truth was uncertain, but hope was something this child desperately needed. He stayed crouched beside the bed, one hand steadying the mother's arm, the other gently patting Emily's back. To distract her from the fear, he asked gentle questions. "How long has Mommy been sick?" Emily sniffled, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. "A few days. She said she just needed rest. I tried to make soup, but I couldn't reach the stove. I was too scared to leave her alone." James's heart ached at the weight this little girl had carried, a responsibility far too heavy for someone so young. He squeezed her hand, whispering reassurance. "You did the right thing, Emily. You were so brave to come find me." In the distance, faint sirens began to rise, growing louder with every passing second. Emily's eyes widened, clinging tighter to James's uniform as hope flickered through her fear. Help was finally on the way. The wail of sirens drew closer until flashing red and blue lights painted the walls of the small house. Within seconds, paramedics rushed through the front door, their equipment bags swinging at their sides. James quickly stepped back to give them room, but Emily refused to release his arm, her little fingers digging tightly into his sleeve. The medics surrounded her mother, checking her vitals, placing an oxygen mask over her face and preparing IV fluids. Their movements were quick and precise, but to Emily it looked overwhelming. She buried her face against James, whispering over and over, "Please don't let her die, please." James bent down, his voice calm and steady despite the urgency in the room. "She's in good hands now. They know what to do, and I'm right here with you." His words anchored her even as fear swirled all around them. When the stretcher was lifted and her mother was secured, Emily's eyes darted up desperately. "Can I go with her?" she pleaded, her voice cracking. James nodded firmly. "Of course, I'll take you to the hospital myself. You won't have to be alone." As the paramedics carried her mother out, James guided Emily toward the flashing ambulance. The night air felt cooler, sharper, as if the world itself was holding its breath. For the first time, Emily loosened her grip just enough to wipe her tears. The turning point had come, the difference between despair and a fragile new hope. The hospital waiting room buzzed with soft voices and the occasional hum of machines, but for Emily, time seemed frozen. She sat curled up in a chair, knees pulled to her chest, her eyes locked on the emergency room doors. James stayed by her side, offering quiet reassurance, a juice box from the vending machine, a blanket from the nurse's station, and stories to keep her mind from drowning in fear. Hours passed before a doctor finally emerged. His voice was calm, steady. "Your mother collapsed from exhaustion, dehydration, and untreated pneumonia. It was serious, but she's stable now. She's going to need rest and care, but she will recover." Emily's tears came in a rush, relief shaking her small body as she clung tightly to James. For the first time since that desperate cry on the street, her sobs carried hope instead of fear. But James knew their struggles weren't over. Returning home would mean facing the same poverty and loneliness that had nearly cost Sarah her life. He couldn't let them fight this battle alone. Quietly, he began reaching out to local charities, to community groups, even to his fellow officers. He didn't share names, only the truth of a family in need. The response was overwhelming. Groceries, clothing, and funds poured in. Volunteers offered to clean and repair their home. A nearby church organized a fundraiser for medical bills. Compassion spread like wildfire, each act of kindness weaving a safety net for Sarah and Emily. When Sarah was finally well enough to leave the hospital, she returned to find her world transformed. The small, weathered house she had once struggled to keep standing was no longer a symbol of despair. Volunteers had cleaned, repaired, and stocked it with fresh groceries. Emily's bedroom had new bedding, donated toys, and even a few hand-drawn notes from children who wanted her to feel loved. The moment Sarah stepped through the door, she broke down in tears, overwhelmed by the kindness that surrounded her. Emily, her little face beaming with joy, hugged her mother tightly before running to James. She wrapped her arms around him, whispering a soft, "Thank you." That single word carried more weight than any medal or praise ever could. In the weeks that followed, neighbors who were once strangers stopped by with meals, offered rides to appointments, and invited Emily to play. The community, touched by one little girl's courage, became her extended family. Sarah found a new job with steady hours, giving her the time she desperately needed to heal and be present with her daughter. James often visited, sometimes with his own family, sharing meals and laughter in the once quiet home. Watching Emily's smile grow brighter each day reminded him of the night everything changed. As the sun set one evening, James reflected on the lesson etched forever in his heart. That compassion still lives in this world. Sometimes it only takes the bravery of a child to remind us all of the difference love and kindness can make. Life often reminds us that even in our darkest moments, hope can be found through the kindness of others. Emily's courage and one officer's compassion sparked a chain of love that changed an entire community. Stories like this prove that no act of care is ever too small to matter. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell icon so you never miss more uplifting stories like this. Together, we can keep the spirit of kindness alive, one story at a time.